have to become yourself.
Welcome to Creating a Buzz About Health podcast with Paula Nathaniel.
Hello, so welcome to this, my 200th episode of my podcast. And I've spent a bit of time thinking, how can I celebrate my 200th episode? And obviously I was calculating when it would land. And with a little bit of tweaking, it's landing on World Bee Day, which just felt so appropriate. And then the universe and the planets all aligned, and I was able to invite Nathaniel Parant who I met on SKOOL from Light Heart Vision, to be my 200th episode guest. So, Nathaniel, welcome.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm so honored. And, synchronistically, you are our 100th guest just a few months ago, right?
Oh, wow.
So that's so interesting. I wore my bee hat today. And, I've always had this affinity with bees. I remember just being entranced and in total state of wonder as a little boy, watching the bees, especially the bumblebee, and just how like the dance that was happening. And I was telling you a little while ago on SKOOL, when I first started my entrepreneurial endeavor, not even realizing that was what it was really looking at helping bees, because there's been a lot of talk about our intertwined survival, but also just that mutually reciprocal relationship we have with bees. I think it's so fascinating. And then when I met you and you talk about bees being 12th dimensional beings, and everything I've learned about bees so far, it's more and more wonder has emerged over my lifetime.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. And yeah, it's, as we've been talking over the last few months, there's been so many more instances where we can see the parallels between bees and community. And you are all about community, and both of us are building our communities on SKOOL. And the platform of SKOOL just seems to replicate how the bees work. And so it just seems natural that we were pulled together. And the reason, I love talking to you anyway, but the real prompt for having you as my 200th guest was about the project that you're working on now. So would you like, because I can't wait to share this, and it's going to raise so many questions. So tell me what it is that you are building now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that prompt. And for me, I spent a lot of time as an entrepreneur, and even as a little boy, let's wind back. I've always felt this calling to fulfill a bigger purpose than myself, and to really help our world somehow, help humankind. But really, I like to see us all as this interconnected web of life on the earth. And I remember being a little boy and looking at how we were treating the land and feeling like we're so out of harmony as a species, like there was something we've forgotten. And I remember even looking at the individuals, talking about a state of wonder, looking at the grownups when I was a boy and realizing they were playing a game with themselves. Like they lost touch with something, they forgot something. But I believe in our heart of hearts, in the essence of who we are, which I feel is our soulful self. There's a soulful creator, I believe, in all of us. And when I can't think of any more of a soulful creator than bees. So anyways, I've been on quite a journey. I mean, it started really in my, I would say my mid-teens, and then my later teens. I was guided to go and into my first formal meditation workshop. I guess it was a Vipassana 10-day retreat. And I started getting visions of kind of this role that I've played, and all kinds of insights into the interconnection of things, the nature of light. And then fast forward a couple of years, a being of light, pure light, appeared to me in the forest. And it totally changed the trajectory of my life, because I was trying to understand everything from a place of quantum physics and science, and trying to, solve these problems, because I've always been deeply interested in philosophy. And then fast forward, that led me to studying indigenous wellness, learning more about our relationship with all of life on the planet, our role as stewards. I served in Indigenous settings and communities for many years, working in community. One of my deep insights working in a community was, because while I was studying Indigenous wellness in college, that's where that being who I knew was Christ, and yet was so out of religious context. It was just purely, that being guided by love is what led me to this, and this seeking to fulfill this purpose. While I was in college, I had visions of community centers around the world, and how it was so important to reconnect our children with our elders and our grandparents, and for that bridge to be restored. And that was at the heart of these community centers. And I remember one vision in particular. I was in the waters, the living waters of one of these community centers. And while I was in college and I was describing this vision of a community centers, and as I was telling this woman who owned a new age store that was called the Heart of Unity, and this was the first place I was ever introduced to like any kind of new age thing, because all my experiences were really direct experiences. Spent a lot of time in nature, contemplating paradoxes, contemplating mathematics and science and all this stuff. But as I was describing this and the expansion and contraction of the universe as I saw it, this feather manifested out of thin air. And we were the only ones in this space, and she didn't sell any feathers, and I saw it clearly, but there was a pillar, so she didn't see the manifestation of it, but I saw it appear out of thin air and gently fall to the ground. And I stopped the conversation. I said, "A feather just manifested out of thin air." And so we both got up and looked at it, and there was this feather all with a perfect new growth. I'd never seen a feather like that. It was just all new growth on a feather, like a very young feather. And I held it up. I reached down, picked it up, and looked at it. I was just entranced. And it was her story. She's like, we need to put it by the cash register, because she had cash flow problems, right? Which seems to be an ongoing challenge with soulful entrepreneurs. And I said, "That's fine. It's your store, but I'd like to buy one of your journals and take this feather down to the water." And I did that. I touched it onto the waters, blessed the lake there. And then I just filled this whole journal with writing. I probably spent a few hours writing there. And I couldn't understand the meaning of what this was. And so I asked one of the Inuit grandmothers, who's also part of my program, because she was really spiritually attuned and had a whole council of spiritual grandmothers that she would check in with, the non-physical ones. And she returned with the feather a few days later, and she said, "This was a message from the angels, that you're here to help build these community centers around the world that will help a lot of people." Now, that was humbling for me. And to me, humility is a state of bring back to that state of wonder when I was a little boy. And I didn't really know what that meant. And then I still am on that quest to understand exactly my role to play. Fast forward a few years, and I was serving Indigenous seniors in this beautiful community center that had been expanded, recently renovated. Douglas Cardinal was the architect, like beautiful medicine wheel dome, and you'd stand there and it would reflect sound to you. And there was all this original artwork, truly a beautiful space. But there was a lot of problems, as I've noticed in a lot of hierarchical settings, with toxicity. There was a lot of changeover. It was not an easy place to work. And I saw a lot of bullying things happen. And I was also exposed to some of these things. And I realized, it made me reflect on the vision of community centers. What is, if we're going to build all these community centers, we can't have them filled with people who are ego driven and, fighting hierarchically and all this stuff. And I really realized community is about communicating our unity, and it's an inside out game. And that was about that time I really became more fascinated with bees and how they operate together. And how they are, they're dancers, right? And the way that their wings, you could speak much more in depth about this, but like to me, resin and frequencies and vibrations, all that stuff is really interesting. And like the hexagonal pattern that they naturally create from their frequency, always stood out to me. And so much of my design, because I'm a multimodal artist, and I'm always, drawing and figuring out geometries and how things relate. I always come back to this hexagon structure, like, continuously. And so fast forward to discovering SKOOL, um, and still having this quest for community. We opened our Light Her Vision community on SKOOL, but we had been building it for a long time. And as a a soul led on developing entrepreneur, I would say I was a wantrepreneur more than anything, and I called myself a soulpreneur, but a lot of people heard that as a solopreneur, and that's
Yeah.
how I felt. That's how I felt. I felt I'm working in isolation. I'm, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm investing tons of money to learn sales and marketing skills, which never really resonated with me, because I feel like I believe in cooperation, I believe in collaboration, I believe in co-creation. And those are the three pillars of our association: is connection, community, and co-creation. And it's in that order, because I feel like when my partner and I, we launched into the unknown with all the crazy times of the shutdowns and all this stuff that was going on, we really left with that question of, like, what is conscious community, and how do we serve conscious community? How do we build bridges between conscious communities? And one of the key things I realized is, like, it's really important to have, for each of us, to be connected to who we really are before we enter community. And that's the only way to really have a healthy community. Otherwise, what we notice is there's a lot of people out there who are, like, wounded, who are in need of, support and things, and who are looking for a community to take care of them.
Mhm.
Instead of what I believe is, our motto is, like, what can you do for your community, not what can your what not what your community can do for you, in the same, similar vein of what JFK was, encouraging people to think of when it came to um, eh, eh, uh, the country, right? And, you know, I finding SKOOL, there's been so much resonance, like meeting you. I feel like soul families are finding themselves based on their interest and their resonance. And I feel like collectively, many of us feel like we have this higher purpose to fulfill.
Mhm.
So a couple weeks ago, I was meditating, and I've been fasting on the new moon cycles. And I was getting profound vision of something so simple, and yet so profound. And my neurodivergent mind started putting all these things together. And I was shown a model of how we can actually create a dynamic co-creation, synergistic economic model. Um, and there's a lot of depth and layers to this. And I've been sharing it with some inspired people. And interestingly enough, the first six people that I shared it with all got it. And because I was a little worried that it was a little too complex, maybe, but because it's a symbol and a sacred geometry that we all recognize so well, I knew it was a gift from the divine, and it was something that I was here to activate. And it really is about activating and synergizing our soul purposes. Um, so it is. I'll say this and then I'll show it, because everyone will recognize it. The
Yeah.
sacred geometry is a truncated icosahedron, so it utilizes the sacred hexagon pattern, which we talked about, but it also has 12 very, to me, very human geometries, which is the pentagon. When we think of giving high fives and the elements and the connection that we have with our role as stewards. And also this whole conversation of moving from 3D to 5D, all of these things I feel are part of that element of five. It's to me, a very human number. And to me, six is a very, it's that hexagon is the bees as well. So I was shown this geometry and how it can work together in a truncated icosahedron, which I didn't really know at that time was a buckyball, and I didn't know very much who Buckminster Fuller was. I never really looked at him, although I've been obsessed with geodesic domes since I was like a preteen. I'm like, why don't we just have geodesic domes everywhere? We could be growing biodomes, and it's like the most structurally sound. I've been talking about geodesic domes, but I never looked at the originator of them. So all to say is a truncated icosahedron is a very recognizable geometry all over the world, right? It's
Yeah.
probably the most universally played game in the world, which is soccer or football in the UK and most of the world, right? And the sacred geometry here is so beautiful because, in working with people that are working in pods, I really like the pod model, especially being an education association. And the root word of education is to draw or bring out what is within. And as a man who's been deeply, and as a little boy, deeply impacted by education, I think most children are, I realize that we're doing everything backwards, right? We're imposing all this knowledge that a lot of it probably isn't even true onto these little minds. We're conditioning them. And now, if we're really going to step into our education, it's about drawing out what is our sole purpose? Who are we really, and bringing these things out? But we're not meant to do it in isolation, right? And so the idea of working in pods is we work we work synergistically in a way that honors our sovereignty and our autonomy, and that's a big part of this this whole model. So there's 12 pods of 5, and then the hexagonal structure is where we have 2 teams of support. Let's call them worker bees, light worker bees, right?
Yeah.
And
The old wise worker bees, the ones
Yeah.
that dance, that go out foraging, come back and dance and share the wisdom.
Exactly. That's all what it's all about. And it's interesting too, Paul, like in talking with you, you were so excited about me showing this model of how we can work. And there's more to it, right? There's the 2 pillars of sovereignty, the 2 pillars of Christ consciousness, so to speak, which is really us stepping into our highest expression. And literally 2 teams have like magically kind of come together to support people who want to activate and operate in their soul purposes, and to awaken deeper and deeper to this, and also to collaborate in ways that I think, organically speaking, is going to be really beautiful. There's more to share, but I've said a lot, so I want to give the floor back to you.
Oh no, it is wonderful. And for those listening, what I really love is that your big football or buckyball was actually in school colours as well. So it wasn't just your standard black and white or anything. You actually had it in those rainbow colours that we have with school. Or school really looks like a box of crayons, doesn't it? These brightly coloured thick crayons that you can create with. And so you've got this wonderful colourful ball. And when you first told me about a truncated icosahedron,
Yeah.
Icosahedron. Obviously, it doesn't just sort of roll off the
I
tongue,
know.
but it is such a fascinating shape. And then how you described it to me with these 2 pillars, and we'll talk about Christ consciousness in a minute, but how you've got these 2 pillars with like the foundation, and then all these pods. And you also mentioned earlier about how people following a soul purpose, and like myself, I've always felt I've had a calling, and I do what I feel needs to be done. I don't do or create to sell. Even when I was an artist, I would paint what I was inspired to paint, and then luckily they would sell. And that is quite a distinct difference with business. But what's really interesting that we're both noticing at this time is we have people who have created businesses for money because perhaps they didn't have a greater purpose. They've created these amazingly successful businesses. They know what they're doing. They know how business works, but they get to a stage where their soul is empty, and then they need to call in the soul purpose. So as you say, by working together and combining the soul purpose with the people that have all the parts of the 3D reality, together we can all elevate to a 5D reality where we all win. It's not, for me to win, I have to take from you, which is that old sort of capitalist, framework for business. It's like there's a finite amount of money or sales, and, you either buy my stuff or you buy somebody else's. Whereas when you're working with a soul purpose, you're working from a place of infinity and expansion.
Mm.
So there's always more and there's always growth. And it does have that spiritual aspect to it, because it's very difficult to explain in a scientific way that things can expand. And and if we look at the world from a three-dimensional perspective of separateness and real, what can I see now, and without that vision and without that creation and without the heart, then it does seem quite an abstract concept. But we really are at such a fascinating time, because it's all coming together, and you're bringing it together with this amazing pod. So I love it. And as soon as you were explaining to me, I was like, oh yes, this is what we need. And then, as you also said about that, supporting each other. So it's not about bringing people from 0 to 100. It's people that are sort of 90% there. They either know their life mission, but there's one little piece missing, whether it's how to build a team or how to fill up the bank balance so that you can expand, or people who filled up the bank balance but don't know how to satisfy the soul or the heart. Bringing us all together so that we can work out these problems and share the wisdom, just like a hive.
Exactly.
We're not keeping this wisdom and knowledge to ourselves. We're sharing it, because we know we all have a different soul purpose. But most of us can only elevate when we work together. That's like the plug, isn't it? It's that extra jet fuel to really expand and create the world we want to create.
So essential.
Yeah. Oh,
So
amazing.
essential. Well, and it's interesting. So there's a few things that I feel are important to talk about in this context. And I know you want to talk about Christ consciousness, and there's actually like 8. Well, really, this is a 12D model, right? Because there's 12 pods working together. And I feel like there's a lot of talk of 5D, but a lot of also people are talking about 12D, and you've talked about the bees being 12-dimensional beings. And my understanding too is there's 12 dimensions of ourselves, of compression of consciousness. And so we've really moved from this really impoverished materialistic dogma, which I think is just another version of religion that we some people have called science, but it's really rooted in beliefs of materialism and separation, and this mechanistic view that of random causation that always requires one miracle, which is the Big Bang. Like something comes from nothing, which doesn't ever make sense. Like the nothing that we're talking about is the equilibrium of universal consciousness, and it's the two qualities of the parenting impulses, if you will, that divine loving intelligence that is the bonding, the rejection, the magnetic drive of creation in mutual restraint with the intelligent love that is the will. It's the activity of life. It's the father consciousness and the mother consciousness that are present in all of nature. And that that explains the electromagnetism that is part of our evolution. And when I think of the most soulful co-creators, how could you not think of bees who are going around literally, in such a loving, totally selfless way, pollinating all of the things, making love with the flowers, returning to the hive, sharing all their knowledge in the dance of creation, that rejoicing that really humankind is always intended to be part of, but in forgetting our role as stewards and becoming dominators from all this conditioned religious belief, we have gone through this separation, which I think is really more of a perception than anything. And so part of this transition, I noticed, like, it's interesting you talked about the scarcity model, because that's exactly what Buckminster Fuller showed scientifically, because he did a lot of research about, what he called the world game, this idea that, and I'm just learning about him. I'm not an expert in him because I'm just starting to read more about him. But what I understand is he literally looked at all the supply chains of the world and showed that we had actually already crossed the line where scarcity is actually not the truth. And you got to keep in mind, he was born like right around the time of the Depression, right? So he showed that we actually have a surplus economy. So he was talking about these old systems that we playing in when it came to, business and how we were operating from scarcity models, even our political systems where you have to choose a left side or a right side. He says those are obsolete because we don't need to choose whether we're liberal or conservative when it comes to economics, because there actually is abundance. He was showing this. But the problem that he faced, and which I faced as well as someone who, develops these higher, deeper contemplations and some of the language, he was not comprehensible to a lot of people. If you listen to him talk, he was like talking on this whole other level. I've even talked to polymaths who are like, I didn't understand what he was talking about. I've listened to him and I can comprehend, but I can also see there's a big disconnect. And so this model, I like to think of it as a synthesis of really, well, there's many elements, but in human and spiritual terms, I like to think of it as Buckminster Fuller meets Mr. Rogers meets Christ consciousness, and that's the heart, hands, and head of these things, and maybe the bees are the wings, right? And Mr. Rogers, for I know you're in the UK, and not everyone knows Mr. Rogers. He was more famous in the United States and North America. I grew up watching him, and what I loved about Mr. Rogers is he just had this deep, deep reverence and respect for children, and he spoke to his audience as with this deep heart and care and this remembrance that we are meant to be caring neighbors of one another. We're truly meant to be stewards. And when I think of the pods, just like I think of our neighboring countries and continents and even our neighboring solar systems and things, we're all neighbors of one another. And this coherence, this co-creation coherence circle, and there's actually 8 C's that that I've realized this is. It's a seed, and it's meant to be a cellular model that can replicate itself, just like in nature. And I feel like the people that are gathering for this founding cohort, which we're launching in July, and I'm so excited that you're part of this team to really represent that bee consciousness that is so fundamental. This, Paula, I feel like it's going to naturally and organically, replicate itself, and because it solves a few problems that I've experienced personally. One is the problem of that I've heard spoken of this trust recession that is in the coaching world. I don't know about you, but I've gone through a lot of these programs. Actually, I think I do know about you because you've told me. I've gone through a lot of these like fire hose of information programs, these like good luck programs, where you are exposed to someone who's like maybe a big name, and you get into a coaching program and you get a one-on-one coach, which is a roll of dice. Like you don't know if who they are, and you go this and you spend tens of thousands, if not more, money to do this coaching, and it doesn't always, especially for someone who's highly sensitive and neurodivergent, like with me, who has this big purpose, who have never meant to do it alone. You're working one-on-one with a coach, doesn't fully understand. You get a half an hour every week or 2 weeks, maybe 45 minutes if you're lucky, and it feels like this kind of like, okay, I got another client, and like and so I felt through the gap in a lot of these experiences, but I knew I needed the supports. I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I tried the group cohorts thing, and that seems to be the only 2 models, and it's easy to fall through the gaps in these programs. And then I tried accountability buddies and like some mastermind stuff, and it's like, in the busyness of the world, it's easy to fall through the cracks. Things fizzle out, or you enter a program, you spend $10K for a weekend of all this stuff, and there's something that scarcity is still part of those old models. And so I knew when this appeared to me, it's like, this is a totally new modality of how we can work together in a soulful way. I don't exactly know what the model is called. I shared with you, I believe it was you, I was saying, like, as I was walking after listening to Buckminster and contemplating this motto came into my mind, like one love. There's one love that connects us all, one heart, just like Bob Marley rhymed. And to me, heart is an interesting word because it is literally the same word that is earth. But when you put a horse before the cart, just like with other words, like own becomes now, earn becomes near. And that's what Christ told us is heaven. It's near and now. It's a state of consciousness that we can enter. And it's the same with earth. Like, why do we call this world earth, in English? It's weird. Like, it's probably, earth is just a small percentage of our world. Like, it's mainly oceans, it's mainly sky, it's all the our relations, all the crawlers and the flyers, and it's human beings, it's mountains, it's like, like, why earth? And I think it's a clue from the divine. It's like, when we put the horse before the cart, when we are led by that higher consciousness, that universal mastermind that grows and nourishes all things, well, we start rearranging and organizing ourselves differently. So I believe it's that one heart. And when we're truly in coherence, which is really a buzzword of the day, keep with the bees, connecting the heart and the head is what the indigenous people that I've learned from the elders and things call the red road. But I think even deeper than this, there is the coherence between us and Mother Earth. And when we're truly in rhythm and coherence with that pulse, because she's a living being, that we are, our bodies are expressions of her land as well. I feel like that is, in a moment, can become what I like to call home, heaven on Mother Earth. And then we're all like the bees. We're just enjoying the flowers. We're creating expansive, abundant places and spaces for all children, including ourselves, right? So that's what this, this coherence, co-creation circle is all about. It's about creating that space of one love, one heart, one home. And my beloved pointed out, because I love acronyms, and I didn't notice, she said, "Oh, aloha." And I was like, "Aloha?" She's like, "Yeah, you're the acronym guy. You didn't see that?" I'm like, "Aloha, that sounds like a greeting. It sounds like aloha, or it sounds like ho'oponopono. People can, aloha." So I've been saying that to people, greeting, aloha, aloha, Paula.
I love it, aloha. And great, just on a side note, but when you first described that to me, and I too was thinking aloha, and Greg and I got married on Hawaii. We escaped because we were second time round, and family is complicated, and we had young kids, and we wanted everybody with us, but only for the few hours, not for, for a whole day or a couple of weeks. So we escaped to Hawaii. And actually, inside our wedding rings, we have engraved in Hawaiian, which I now can't recite, but it basically is "love gives life within," and that's what we have in both of our wedding rings. And when we came back in the field behind the house, the farmer let us use it, and we had a huge blessing. And then we had 250 friends and 98 children.
Wow.
So all sharing. And it's interesting because although they weren't with us on our actual wedding, by having a blessing and a big shared feast, and it really was a shared feast, everybody brought food and shared it. The people that missed that memo were like going, "Wow, who did your catering?" Because when you share, this was again a perfect example of that collaboration and cooperation with love. Was people didn't bring the moldy food at the back of the fridge. They brought their best dish, they brought their signature, the best thing that they loved to eat, that they wanted to share. And so it was just so full of love. It was amazing. So yes, I love olo olo, or there's so many connections with what you're doing, with everything. And with us, with our lives, with with SKOOL, with the community building, our experiences. But I'm gonna bring forward the elephant in the room, which is the Christ consciousness.
Sure.
And before I let you explain it, because you explain it so well, when I first heard you talk about it, and I didn't know you, and we just had a Zoom to get to know each other several months ago, and I was brought up as a Christian, but I'm not a practicing Christian. I really am fascinated by all religions. So, I traveled around the Himalayas to find out about Buddhism, and then, living with an Islamic community for a year, but nothing tempted me enough to become part of a religion. And I'd also, in my early business life, I got to know quite, I suppose you would call strict Christian practices. So Plymouth Brethren, So, I became quite aware of religion, and also through my painting work, I really loved researching the Bible, and I did quite a series of paintings from the Apocrypha because I was fascinated with the stories, the fanciful stories of angels. And actually, in this room, I have got 3 angel paintings that I did inspired from the Apocrypha. Anyway, what was really interesting was when you started talking about Christ consciousness, only a few weeks before I had started my path of pollen, which is the Himalayan path of pollen. So
Mm.
you've got that sort of Buddhist Hindu background to this path of pollen, which is bee shamanism. And I was taught some movements and exercises which connect you deeper with the bees and with earth and the heart. And there was one movement halfway through the movement where we had to pause, and you have your arms out, and we pause. And then I was told, now focus on Christ consciousness. And I almost froze because I was like, what's Jesus got to do with shamans? To the point that after I had to say, what's Jesus got to do with this? What's this Christ consciousness? Because you're in a sort of, the crucifixion position. And so I was really intrigued. And then I was told, forget all the images, forget what you think you know about Christ consciousness, but think of the wholeness and the connection and the wisdom that comes with Christ consciousness. And then literally, a week or so later, I meet you and you talk about it. And then you shared with me Christ's letters, which I have been reading. I haven't finished yet, but they take some contemplation and reading and rereading. But oh my word, I just love them. And moving from that, if you talk about Christ consciousness, are you part of a religion, to Christ consciousness as a form of consciousness, it's a game changer. And it has been so comforting for me, and being able to share some of the things that I have read in it, with people who perhaps don't realize where I've got it from. It is comforting, and we're in such challenging times now. And yet to think that these letters, they are a gift to help us through these times. So now over to you.
Okay. There's so much here, and I really appreciate you bringing this conversation up. It's interesting how your experience with doing bee movements and being in that position of the crucifixion was, a reflection where you began this contemplation. Because actually, my first experience of awakening was at a Buddhist form of meditation. So Vipassana means insight. And it was one of the techniques that Buddha taught. But it was not, Buddha, like any master, was not formulaic. He would give whatever the individual needed. But this particular technique is where you just, you be with all of your sensations around the body, and you just develop equanimity. Because what he realized on a very subtle level is the reactive mind tends to judge things as good or bad. So pleasant sensations are good, so it creates craving for them, and unpleasant sensations are bad, so it creates aversion, or and it's the magnetic drive. It's bonding and rejection, the same thing that Christ talks about in the letters, and how this is part of our egoic nature. And so Buddha recognized that we can transcend it, and that basically we want to stop and get out of dodge. But then Christ as a being showed a whole other expression, that we're meant to not to escape to heaven, to get to that the golden pastures, but really to embody it and to bring it into earth, and to infuse it here. And one of my first memories doing this, it was really an unraveling of my own energetic centers and having vision. And I had very distinct remembrance of being in the crowd and witnessing the crucifixion. And it felt very, very personal to me. And I didn't understand why that happened to me or who I was. Clearly, it was evidence to me personally that, reincarnation or previous life experiences was a fact of reality, because I saw other lifetimes as well. And I wondered for many years why. And I was actually very angry at who we like to call as Jesus. And that's also interesting, that name, because we know that was actually not his name. And where did that name come from, right? We've heard it's either Yeshua. I've had some friends say that's not even what his name was. Who knows? Yeshua or Yahshua. And that would translate more to Joshua in our current speak. So why do we call him Jesus? And to me, it's another divine clue. It's like, because what did he tell us? He said, you too can do these things and more. And I think he was, when I hear him, that reverberation through the depiction of him in the Bible, I always felt like it was a collective calling. It wasn't like, Nathaniel, you're going to do what Jesus did and more. It was always like us coming together. That's always what it felt like to me, what he was saying. And his name, especially in the letters, one of the beautiful parts of the letters, and I'll talk a little bit about maybe where they come from, is in them he clarifies through his true autobiography, which to me resonates as truth, that he would have spoken about the mother more, but he didn't at all. He actually excluded her from his teachings, the mother divine consciousness. He only spoke of the father because he wanted to introduce that there's a parenting impulse present within all of life that grows all things. It's the life force, literally. And he was awakened to this and he became enlightened to this knowledge. But the people of his time were very fixated on this idea of a being on high who judged and sent condemnation and plagues and was a separate being, a very ultimately powerful being. And he explains why that would be a natural outcome for people at a certain level of consciousness as we're awakening to ourselves. But he was clearly shown that the nature of reality is actually a foundation of loving intelligence that is present in all of life. And the mother is interesting because, in the letters he describes the mother as all form. And indigenous peoples all over the world talk about this too. Like they describe the land as our mother, and they even go so far as to say as we are the land. And so his name, Jesus, if we say it in Spanish, is Jesus. So he is us. He reminded us, and all masters do that, to go within, that we're all interconnected. We all come from oneness. But also she is us. The land is us. Mother Earth is us. And to me, this is an important distinction because we're in this time where I've noticed this trend. I've literally sat across some table from people who study like A Course in Miracles, which is also attributed to him. But I don't think, to me, it is nowhere near the clarity and straightforwardness of the letters. I actually don't resonate with the Course in Miracles very much. And a lot of, I know, world teachers and stuff have brought their teachings from there. But there's some things that the Course in Miracles talks about, like everything is an illusion or Maya, this concept. And we're in a time now where a lot of people are saying, yeah, this is, they believe this is a simulation. And there's danger to this. I've sat across from someone said, you're an illusion. I'm the only one that's real, and everything else is an illusion or a simulation. And I think there's real danger, especially in this time where AI is emerging. There's a lot of fear around and stuff. But if we see that all form, including my body, yours, the bees, all the lands, the flower, everything is our mother, and she is a loving intelligence that it's our role to be in stewardship, and all of the activity of life, everything we do, and all of the electrical impulses, all of the movement in life is the expression of Father, then we can start, I think, re-entering into that rejoicing that we hear, that we see, and you can hear it in the frogs now, the springtime. I was listening to the songbirds this morning, just that pure resonance of rejoicing in creation, like a new day is coming. If anyone's heard of God's chorus of crickets, when you slow down, and it's just this beautiful melodies of harmonies and everything. I think this is, to me, what's the value. So to kind of step back a little bit, I had this vision of being in this crowd. I didn't know what it meant. For many years, it was painful for me too, because I had anger towards what happened. Like how could we murder a master of pure love, and how could he allow himself to be killed in such a way? I felt like he was so powerful. He could have avoided that. He knew it was happening. He could have just sidestepped it, But I realized, all things do truly happen with deeper purpose, especially when we're aligned with our source. It was probably the only way that his name would stay relevant in our society. In the letters, there's an edge to them because he does clarify his teachings, and he rejects the version of him that is presented in the Bible. So he says it's from my personal perspective, it's isn't that there isn't wisdom in the Bible, but we know any like rational person, we know the Bible's been, you know, it's been things have been excluded from you, like you mentioned the Apocrypha. Most Bibles don't have the Apocrypha in them. It's been interpreted several times. I've heard direct translations of Aramaic into English of like the Lord's Prayer, and it's like basically quantum physics. Like there's so much that's been changed and altered. I think right to it control the people, and so the letters clarifies his teachings, and like you said, they are a transmission that are actually it's actually a bridge in consciousness between his transcendent consciousness and our own. He describes them as a master's course, and he says that through cleansing our consciousness, healing our beliefs, and then basically developing self-control, which I like to think of as creative mastery. He also describes enlightenment as like mastery of the elements. Those are the two things that we need to do to step into our Christhood. And he was so excited in his days because he realized how simple it was to be like in the state of what he called heaven. The kingdom of heaven is a state of pure unconditional love, which I imagine this is what the bees are embodying, what the birds are embodying. And we've formed all these beliefs as humans that separated us from this truth that we are. So the letters are letters. They're not another Bible. They're literally, I think the purpose of them is to enter into conversation with Christ so that we can recognize our Christhood as well, which means the anointing, right? Which means stepping into our full expression of who we truly are. And that's a world that I certainly want to be part of. And one of the most fun things he says in the letters to me, and the most exciting things, is he said, life truly begins when you transcend the selfhood, which is the cause of all of our problems. If you look at the world, I mean, it's very clear that this is the cause of our problems. It's the ego drive that thinks it's separate and does things selfishly. And yet it's also part of our evolution as consciousness. We need the ego. It ensures that our survival. It ensures that we, take care of ourselves, that we feed ourselves, that we, it's important, but it's not who we are. So it's like, I like to think of it as our cocoon, and it's who we have to merge through to develop our mastery, maintain our individuation of self, and also to develop compassion. Because if it was just easy, like a light switch to become enlightened, and we wouldn't have as much, I think, reverence and sacredness, perceiving that life truly is this. It's an unfolding, and it is a journey, and it doesn't always feel pleasant. Like you said, this is very challenging times in our plans, very interesting times that we live in. All these emergent technologies, the heightened polarity, the gap between what it means to be wealthy and what it means to be in poverty is like there are all these polarities. And yet I feel like true spiritual enlightenment is the solution to all of our problems, especially when we come together and like work together in like a fluid way that creates a dynamic world that we can all be in reverence together in. Like, I don't know about you, Paula, but if someone just gave me like multiple billions of dollars and said, do whatever you want, go get your yacht and your thing and whatever, I it would not be so enjoyable to me to be a billionaire in a time when I know there is so much of this conflict, people struggling. I would much rather be exorbitantly wealthy when I know all of us are exorbitantly wealthy and we can all enjoy the resources. And to me, I like to think of this term. I was inspired years ago, this idea like, well, what would it be like to be the first quadrillionaire? We don't even really have any trillionaires on the planet, but the first quadrillionaire. No one was talking about a quadrillionaire. And then Divine kind of prompted me. It's like, thinking of enlightenment. It's like what you were saying earlier. It's like the abundance, that infinite expanse. Well, what if we were all infinitaires and we recognized, because we're all literally trillionaires walking around, like we have trillions of cells cooperating so intelligently. And when we combine that and we recognize our true nature, like we're infinite, eternal beings who are part of a larger picture, what would it be like to live on a planet where we are truly infinitaires, as masters walking around, all wonderful, unique expressions of these emergent journeys that we've all been on. And that's a beautiful thing to embody and to wholeheartedly embrace. And this is, I think, the next step for me in my service to the world. So I'm thrilled. And my goodness, I know I've been sharing a lot. I feel like I'm just like giving, like sharing so much of the divine inspiration that's been given to me, because I really care about what you're doing. And everyone listening to this on World Bee Day, happy World Bee Day to all of our bee sisters, especially, and brothers. I feel like what a blessing that we still have this opportunity, and that we're not too far gone, that we can course correct, I feel. And I believe that when we come together as caring neighbors, embracing the fact that we do feel this calling, that we have this higher calling that you spoke of, and we come together and remember why we're here and who we are, like, it is not only is world enlightenment, heaven on Mother Earth possible, it's also our responsibility. And I believe it truly is a small group of people that comes together, that believes they can change the world, that does change the world. So that's my invitation. It's our invitation, and this is our work, right? This is a we thing, and I'm so thrilled to be being it with you, Paula.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so honored as well. And it just seems to be the next step. And it's so interesting when you say, about that whole thought of what would you do if you were a millionaire, multimillionaire, billionaire, trillionaire, quadrillionaire. And I think for so many of us, it's not about having that money stacked up in a bank. It's about what you can create. And we have this self-imposed limitation that you cannot create without money. And yet so many people do. When you look at all the artists, you look at the makers, and then you look at nature, for a garden to grow, it doesn't need to have cash in the bank. Everything is self-seeding. You have these pods that will expand. And, that is what is so exciting. But where I think we limit ourselves is two things. We limit with the vision of what is possible, but we also limit with that asking for help and cooperation. And I just want to share something which, for me, I feel that this may sound crazy to so many people, but my evolution over the last year is about asking for help. And instead of, my word for I'm trying to think which year it was, 2025 was receive. And so I was thinking, okay, I've got to be open to receive the money or the resources to do what I need to do. But what actually happened was I was put into a position where I had to ask for help. And that was really, really challenging from someone who's always been so independent. And how that pivot from being vulnerable and needing help then created the opportunity for me to ask for help so that I could receive it. And yesterday, a few weeks ago, a friend of mine who's a beekeeper, and he works with energy lines. So he's one of my teachers, and we get together every now and again, and we just do these massive downloads of what we are both learning about bees. And it's like we're two sort of, train tracks that we sort of converge, go away on another journey with another, view, and then we come back together again with the same sort of understandings, but from different perspectives. Anyway, he visited my bee spa a few weeks ago, and he is far more experienced at dowsing or divining. And I dowse and divine to know where to put beehives. But then I tend to stop. When I know where to put the beehives, I stop. But he goes deeper. So when he came to visit me, and I've got all my beehives all lined up, and I know that they're on an energetic line and it's fine. But I just stopped at that and put the hives there, and it's always been successful, and swarms have moved straight in. But then he dowsed in the other direction and found nodes. And I've got like 4 really powerful nodes on my property. So in my bee spa, although my observation hive was on in a corner which is on one line. If I was to move it to the other side of the window, it would be on a node, which would be so
Oh,
much more powerful. So
wow.
it was like, oh, and this is a huge antique bookcase, a solid wood bookcase that my husband converted into a beehive. And we had bees
Hmm,
move in last year, and then they passed away during the winter, which is,
hmm.
it's natural and that's fine. Well, then I had this pause where I thought, great, I can do stuff. And then a swarm moved in. So then it was like, oh, okay, they're happy. And I was so excited that a swarm found them, because it meant they had to come through a hole in the wall and find this hive. So that was really good. Well, then the swarm has been moving all around the garden, and other swarms have come in and crazy stuff's going on. And yesterday I thought the swarm had moved out. So when swarms move in, they settle or they don't. So, you know, you could have 2 weeks where you think you've got bees and then suddenly they're gone again.
Wow.
Anyway, yesterday morning I came in here and it's been really cold. So we had really, you know, like days of 22, 24 degrees, and then it dropped down and we're in single figures.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
been really cold. So yesterday morning I come in here, and because he sowed this seed of moving the bookcase, I was like, yeah, I really want to do that. And I've ordered, and it arrived 2 days ago, an apitherapy hive, which I wanted to put on the other side of this window. So he'd given me this idea that I should move the bookcase to one side, then I could put the apitherapy one on the other side, and it would be nice, and the tube for the bees to come in would be smaller, and, you know, and it just all seemed to work. But it meant moving this bookcase. So yesterday morning I come in here and the bees are really quiet. And I think, okay, I think they have moved out. So I tapped on the wood, I put my ear against it, not a sound, no bees anywhere. I took the pipe out, I blocked it all up. Then I tried to move the whole thing and realized it was too heavy for me. So it's like, oh God. And I didn't want to wait until my husband came home from work, because I knew he'd be tired. And it was just, I just thought, a simple job of just moving this case from one side of the room to the other. So I thought about asking some of my neighbours, but then I remembered this friend of mine who is the beekeeper and whose idea it was to move it in the first place. So I messaged him and I just said, are you around today? Because I'd quite like some help to move. And I said, I'd quite like somebody who's strong, and a beekeeper, thinking there were no bees in there. Anyway, so he comes over and we sort of, you know, we empty out a bit of it and we start to move it. And then we realize it's been screwed to the back wall.
Oh,
Then we have to take all the frames out that were hanging in there that had old wax comb in. And as we take the frames out, we find a cluster of bees. So there's actually a few thousand bees in there. And because it's cold, they
wow.
turn into a cluster.
Oh, wow.
So there we are with no suits on or anything. And suddenly we have a room with bees, and there was a couple of hundred bees that came out to see what was going on, and then they all go to the window, and so we're trying to get them out, but it's really cold outside, and it's like,
Okay.
oh my gosh. And so then it became a really big job that went on for about 4.5 hours,
Wow.
whilst we had to find where the screws were, which the bees had propolized over, and we had one hidden underneath an extra bit of wood that we had to put in to stop bees escaping. So it was a really big job. And then it turned out that the case wasn't that heavy, and we had to take the bees out, put them in a box. So we're working, you know, with
Wow.
hundreds of bees buzzing around us in this room. They were so calm. Neither of us got stung. It was absolutely beautiful. And then we had to find like a drill bit, because we had to move the hole to get the bees out, to put the tube in, because the tube was too long and it was buckling. So there's this wonderful phrase which I've used many times called shaving a yak. It comes from a writer, and I will share this little story. So this writer was writing a book, and he was looking out of his window. But as he's trying to write, and anyone who tries to write, the slightest distraction becomes procrastination. And he had, the drain pipe was dripping, so this annoying drip was stopping him from writing. So he knew he had to fix the drain pipe, but he had lent his ladder to his next door neighbour. But he couldn't ask for the ladder back until he returned the neighbour's cuddly toy, which the neighbour had lent to him for his daughter to play with. But then the dog had ripped open the cuddly toy, and the stuffing had come out, and it was stuffed with yak hair. So he had to shave a yak to get the hair, to stuff the thing, stitch it up, take it back to the neighbour to then ask for the ladder so then he could fix the dripping pipe. And there are so many times in life when a little job becomes a shaving a yak job. And that's what we had yesterday. And now, through working with those bees all day yesterday, we realised that this is half the swarm, but the half without the queen. So now what I've got to do today, and it's tricky because it's cold and the weather forecast isn't very good, is I've got to go to one of my other colonies to pinch basically a frame of eggs and hopefully queen cells to add to this hive, because otherwise the bees are just going to die.
Wow.
So, just from moving, it suddenly becomes this thing. But my point is about how everything is connected. We're connected. And he was willing to help me for 4.5 hours. And, I got this lovely message, I messaged him and, I was so grateful. And then he was like, no, but we're just working together, helping the bees. And we both learned so much through doing this. And we were, it was really quality time that we had together, because often we never have enough time to chat. So we're chatting. So, yeah, it is this collective consciousness. And getting back to Christ's letters, what I particularly love is through the letters, you have the voice of a man, the embodiment of a human. So he shares about when he was angry and how he had these elated states when he was on his solar retreat in the desert, and how he suddenly had this understanding how everything was made up of trillions of cells at a time when no one could explain that. And then coming back to the normal world and trying to explain this stuff, couldn't be proven. But then at the same time, sharing this wisdom, which is collective consciousness from all the masters. So he's saying this isn't just the man with the beard who was from Palestine. This is the wisdom of Buddha, the wisdom of Muhammad, all coming together. And he's the one who just thought, okay, let's set the record straight. Let's give them the message that they need now. And that's what I love, is this coming together. And through receiving these letters, I'm sure you're the same. You start to see really inspirational projects and you think, I think they've read the letters, I think, but because of this, all this dogma for all the different religions, it is quite uncomfortable to openly say, or I've read letters from Jesus, or Christ, or, anything, because then it puts you into that box, that restricted box, which the letters are trying to break open. We're not in boxes. We are all one. We are all connected. Doesn't matter what you practice, where you live, what religious dogmas you have been part of. At the end of the day, we're all living on the same earth, and we all have these special gifts that we're meant to share with each other. Isn't that exciting? Exciting?
I really appreciate you bringing this into the conversation, because that's actually one of the things he calls forth in the letters, and there's follow-up messages to them too. And a little bit of the story, the backstory is he appeared to another woman in 1960, and I've met other people that he's appeared to in different ways, and she was willing enough to go through 40 years working with him to cleanse her consciousness, where when the year 2000, when the transmission started, and she describes it like she was just a secretary taking notes. So and she was told to leave her ego identity out of it and just be known as the recorder. And she passed away a few years ago. I think she was 102 or 3. And I think it's, I think the story, I love that you brought in his humanity, because how he's portrayed, with the few lines that are in the Bible, is this very stoic, perfect being who was, God, who made this big sacrifice. But when you realize he was a human being, and he said, he called himself the Son of Man. Why did he say that? And why, if he was the only special one, why would he say, you too will do these things and greater? There's a lot of unanswered questions that the Bible preserved these statements. And he calls forth, yeah, you're right, people from all traditions, Taoists, Muslims, Hindu practitioners. And he talks about how, even scientists also, and atheists, I will say, he calls us all, and he explains how our consciousness creates the electromagnetic expressions and the circumstances on our Earth. So our collective consciousness is causing the weather pattern changes and the climatic upheavals and all these things that we're seeing. It's from our consciousness. So isn't that, it's refreshing on one hand, and yet it's still the same dilemma that he found in revealing these things to his mother, as he talks about, because she was, very devoted to her concept of Jehovah, who is sent punishment for the people who are unobedient. And it's the same challenge in those times, is like, people will see this message as an affront to their beliefs, and people hold on to their beliefs like cherished talismans, that they don't want to give up. But also, it puts the responsibility on us. We cannot, there's no savior who's going to come save us. It's up to us to allow the emergence of our Christ nature to work together. And so it really is an essential message for our time. It's like, stop feeding our minds and hearts a miasma of violent media, and that's too part of the evolution of this model, is to go into the spaces, especially in emergent technology. Some of the other players on our team, our team members, are focused on the technological aspects of this, and the root of technology is the principle behind the craft, behind the art, the expression. It's not the gadget. And I feel like this is an important conversation. If we were truly to be soul-aligned technological stewards, which is how I see myself in this, and utilize these technologies, just like Mr. Rogers saw TV as a powerful tool that could influence the minds of young children, and he saw some of the things that were being created and to basically brainwash our children. And he said, I'm going to use this technology to be a force of good. I think it's the same thing, especially we have XR technologies, which is like virtual reality and augmented reality. I think these tools are very powerful, and they allow us, they're powerful educational tools, but they can also be used for violence and things. And then AI obviously is a super powerful tool that's going to be more impactful than the internet. And if we can even imagine what that means. So if it is in the hands of, if we're utilizing it for the benefit of all of us, just like the bees would think collectively, like we need to think of the whole hive here, not just the individuals, versus, being used to exploit people. We really need to overcome this profit over people ideology, and really realize that the people, when we're all thriving, when we're all healthy, creating well-being economies, products and services that are mutually beneficial and not extractive in nature, even all of our educational systems, our religious institutions that are, coming together and creating from a place of a higher vision for all of us, which includes us too. Because I feel like, talking to people like you, Paula, a big propensity for a lot of spiritual healers and teachers is to give, and we ended up becoming depleted. And I feel like we need mutually reciprocal systems that we're all being filled up together. And that is what the letters are about. It's about creating the world that I feel on a soul level all yearn to be a part of. And it's really up to us. It's an inner game, and to come together in that spirit of collective Christ consciousness, I feel I can't think of any other. I'll say this one last thing. On our travels, we found a community they call themselves the 12 tribes of Israel. They are very dogmatic in their religious beliefs, which is one thing that, I had many conversations with them, and we respectfully, appreciate one another. But what they do is every morning and every evening, they gather and circle, and they have dances that they gather, they hold hands, they have pattern dances, and they play live music, and they have all their own songs, and they share everything. No one in the community owns anything. They have restaurants all around the world called the Yellow Delis. And when I was part of this, we became good friends with them on the island. They helped us too. I worked on the farm and did exchange for them. They give us, fresh veggies and everything. They have this bee-like behavior that I thought was so beautiful. And I said, if you could, make this more inclusive for all beliefs, of people, and just more individuality. I feel like that was one of the missing parts, because they all dress similarly and had that. If you would include individuality and a pathway to mastery within this like bee-like way of operating in community and sharing resources and they're very industrious people, just like bees. I was like, this is a perfect model for how we can live together and evolve the consciousness in our world.
Oh, yeah, there are so many parallels. And then I was thinking, when you said about dressing differently, and there's an Indigenous community that I've always felt called to connect with, but I haven't yet, not directly, is the Kogi, who are in Colombia. And they call us, I think, little brother, even though they're very small and we're very tall, but it's because we're young in our minds and we're disconnected. We've still got a lot to learn. But they all dress very similarly, but it could be more because it's natural woven linens, so they all wear these sort of cream linen things. But when you look at a colony of bees, there's so much individuality just with their colors, because they're made up of so many different genetics. You'll get like a rainbow range of stripe varieties. You'll get some that are really black and some that are a bit more orange and everything in between, and some are a bit more gray. So there is that room for individuality. And something, going back to that, what would you do if you won the lottery or had $1 million or quadrillion dollars, is that if you say to people, what would you do if money was no object? And if they can get past that question, their eyes light up and they're like, oh, I'd love to create an orphanage, or I'd love to build this, or I'd love to grow that. And that's the kind of creativity that as humans we want to be living with, because there are other people whose dream is, I'd love to help someone build an orphanage.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't want to build the orphanage, but I'd love to enable someone to build it. Or I've got this bit of land, or I've got these, gold bars, and I'd love someone to transform it into art or into a forest. And that's what we have to accept. That, and I think I got this from being an artist, was that realization. Most artists, you create art and it feels, I suppose you're sort of possessed, or you're channeling, and you're just doing something which to other people may look really easy, but you go through an emotional, it can be very difficult being an artist, because you're sort of possessed and forced to do something which doesn't often have a reward. And then when you price it, it's very difficult, because you do this piece of work, and how do you price something that you feel like you've gone to hell and back to create? But then at the same time, you could have a piece of work that just flowed and came out, but would have perhaps a greater value because it's bigger, or because it connects with your heart. And then it's that realization that there are people who are doing work that perhaps they don't enjoy. They're not doing their soul's purpose, but they are generating a lot of wealth from it. And so buying your art is a compensation for that. And they get joy from exchanging the money. So as an artist, you mustn't feel guilty that you have perhaps earned a lot of money, relatively speaking, for an hour's work, but it's taken you 40 years to be able to do that piece of work in an hour. And this is that exchange. And so I feel really blessed that through my 40 odd years being an entrepreneur, you know, through being an artist and then doing the beekeeping, is seeing that balance, seeing that exchange of values, exchange of skills, and how blessed I feel that throughout both my careers, I've had people who've trusted me to be creative, whether it's with bee projects or with art. And for me to have the humility to be able to receive that. And I've been very lucky that I've worked with people with a surplus of cash. So I've been able to do quite grand projects. You know, there was a bee museum that cost £2 million. I mean, you know, and I was trusted to do that content, to have that idea and say, well, you know, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? We being the operative word. And it did take a we. You know, I could have this vision, but it took the money, it then took the architects, it took the builders, it took other creative people to actually make it a real thing. So that 2 million budget was spread over lots of people, and over many years to actually manifest it. And this is what I love about your pod ideas. So we're going to have all these, or we are building these pods where all these creative ideas and all these creative resources are pulled together. And when somebody can say, oh my gosh, I have this vision, we need to create this because it will be for the good of the whole, by sharing it in this collective football, you then have people going, well, I've got just the thing you need. And so have I. So together we can come and build it. But it takes the trust. And this is the thing. It's that trust to share the visions that have not yet been manifested, and the trust to know, well, on two things. It's letting the ego go, that it becomes a we project, not an I project.
Yeah.
And then there's the shared joy that it took a we to create it.
Yeah.
And that is evolution. That is human evolution. And it's also the trust that other people recognize and see the soul purpose in each of us. It's like they can see in me, oh yeah, you're the bee lady. So if you see, you know, yes, the hive created it, but that little pod, that little seed was from the bee lady. And then from you, your pod, your seed is the heart of home, the heart of earth, you know. And it's that seeing how we can have this ball of seeds, which is then going to expand into like a sky of bubbles, an earth filled with all these wonderful bubbles of creation, of things that on our own we couldn't visualize, we couldn't imagine, and then expanding through coming together.
I love the way I got shivers the whole time, Paula. And you know, I feel like this is a really important topic. You talk about the trust. I feel like that is the wound of community. And, you know, like so many of us have been hurt, and it requires us, you know, that's the healing potential of community. It's also the challenge that we're facing is we need to learn to trust at another level when there does seem to be more, you know, polarity. And this is the paradox, right? It's like we have to trust more when it seems like there's less to trust. A lot of people are feeling less secure. You know, is what I hear. I feel, you know, this calling. And to me, I've leapt several times into the unknown. And one of the things, you know, so that wound of trust, that wound of isolation is what we need to take a leap into something new. And so this isn't just an idea. Like we're launching this. Our first, you know, coherent circle of founders is going to be on July 1st. So this next space is looking and calling for soulful creators, whether you're a conscious parent creating a family, like you said, an artist or an educator. You feel like you have maybe you're a world teacher and you have some mission, or you're an author, or you're an entrepreneur and you know have, you know, skill sets that would add to this, or maybe you're just someone who wants to contribute and has resources. Like I would love for us both you and I to get on a call. So if you feel called, if you're an individual, wanting to be part of this, like I'd love to just get on a call and to invite that connection to happen, because I feel like, we are being called to, like you said, transcend our limited beliefs and to come together in a new way that there is a huge amount of trust. I'm not going to pretend to know how this is going to evolve, and I know that I have to. This is not a me project that I can control. It's going to take on a life of its own, and it really is a seed. And what's interesting about it is the people that have already been coming together. Like we already have like 12 individuals who are interested in, who are devoted to making this happen. And I feel like that in of itself is a huge sign from the divine. Like we're ready. People are comprehending this need to collaborate in a new way. And there is also this beautiful emergent shift in our collective consciousness where it's, we're seeing this bridge between like inspired science, this, we have deeper vocabulary to discuss these things. And there's this, emergent sense of urgency, I feel as well, that a higher vision is needed. So it's, the first iteration is going to be what it is. I think one of the most beautiful things about this model that I've come to realize is it's an emergent collective gathering of proof, because this is one of the things that so many entrepreneurs struggle with, is like gathering the proof. And so many entrepreneurs work for free, probably for too long. They're like, I'll help you. I just talking to, my one friend, he's been coaching someone for free for 4 months, and the person hasn't given them a testimonial yet. I'm like, that's a long time to be helping someone with, and I get it, he has a heart of service, but in coming together as a collective of pods, well, we're all mutually benefiting from our own growth and testimonial, and we can help one another. We can expand. Like Michael Bernard Beckwith inspired me years ago. I was listening to him. He was talking about, we've created this beautiful network of the mind all over the world. Like you and I are talking on different continents in real time. It's like happening instantaneously. It's amazing. It's magic. And we have this, but there's so much noise. There's so much cacophony, and a lot of, there's discordance in a lot of the information that's being sent. So the coherence is missing. And what he said is what we really need now is a network of connecting hearts. And so that's what I see this as, the first iteration of really creating a heart work between individuals who are, it's not just about gathering like in a mastermind for business. It's really, it's synergizing soul purposes. So what is even possible? I'm always wondering, like our highest potential, I think it's a pain point for a lot of us, feeling like, I might not live up to I might not fulfill my full potential or my soul purpose. And then when you think of your children and your parents, and there's a pain to look at your parents who are maybe spending too much time in, their habits. Maybe they're watching too much TV, and your children are maybe, going down that rabbit hole too. You see them on their screens and stuff. It's like, I feel like this is a way that we can, beyond accountability, create a true structure of community commitment. It's like we are committed to fulfilling the purpose of why we came here as the soulful self. And we're not going to let anyone fall through the gaps. We're going to work together, and we're going to do this, and we're going to figure out what is holding you back from it. And I don't know who's going to all come and what their gifts are all going to be, but the gifts that I already see in the individuals like you, Paula, coming together, I mean, with your deep knowledge of collective consciousness of these, but also sovereignty and your spiritual gifts as a healer, like, even just you and I alone having in a circle with people could help people so much greater than us trying to just do individual coaching. To gather all these beautiful souls together, I don't know. I think it's going to be truly miraculous, is the feeling I have, and I'm so thrilled. Yeah.
I do too. I've just been, and this is why I felt we had to share. And World Bee Day seemed the appropriate thing in the 200th episode. But you just mentioned the golden word sovereignty. And when you were describing this model to me, what I loved with the 2 pillars. So would you like to just talk about these
Sure.
2 pillars?
Yeah, and well, there's the 2 pillars as I understand them. The right-hand pillar of Christ consciousness or sovereignty is the embodiment of our truth and our essence and our real power. To me, the only real power in all of existence is the creative power of unconditional love. So it's not just about turning the other cheek, it's about the limitless, infinite, eternal power of love. It's literally, and I felt it. It's, in a few instances, in ceremony and fasting and things, I've felt it come into my body, and it's so powerful. I felt like it made me feel like weak, like I was an infant newborn again. It's so powerful. So I feel like there's this underlying, almost like, it's interesting. It's a paradox, but I feel like at our root nature, so many can be afraid of the power of love. Like, it truly is a force that, it's so powerful. And it's illustrated by, I forget her name, but Wayne Dyer talked about the story of a woman that survived the Rwandan genocide, and she was stored away in a little bathroom in a sympathizer who was on the other side of the genocide. He took in some women and hid them, and managed to hide them, the whole thing, in a very unlikely situation. And she had two things. She brought in an English dictionary. She didn't speak English. She knew she was supposed to share and be a writer. And so she learned English, but also what she managed to do, even though she was hearing the horrors of going on, neighbors killing family and people who knew each other going through all this, she somehow managed to forgive truly everyone who was involved in this, and became such a vessel of love that Wayne Dyer described, like, as she was leaving, there were still armed people on the other side of this, who were looking to kill any survivors. And what she described is, as she was approaching the gates where they needed to pass, I guess, to come into their refugee status, she was so embodied with love that these armed perpetrators, they couldn't help but drop their weapons in her presence, because she was such an embodiment of unconditional love. And I feel like that is the power when we're truly led and guided by divine consciousness. It is our healing, it is our growth, it is our protection, it is a fulfillment of all of our needs. And so when we can learn to trust that we have this mastermind and master heart behind us, that's the right-handed pillar. The other pillar is really what people would describe more as sovereignty, but it's the flesh and blood aspect of embodying our true nature as a child of our Creator in our paperwork, in our status, recognizing that there is a beautiful system already created with regard to us being the inheritors and the beneficiaries of credit. And, when it comes to the relationships of the beneficiary, the trust, and the trustee, and all that, sovereign speak, the law of the land, natural law, being in honorable ways with one another, following that natural law, all that sovereignty. That, I'm not an expert in that. I have general knowledge, but my friend Michael has a team of 6 people called the Masters of Freedom, and they've been helping people with correcting their status for taxation purposes, and also establishing all the trusts and things that need to be in order to to protect our families and our children. People don't recognize they enter into different contracts, through birth certificates and all that. So he's really helping with that. So those are the 2 pillars that we see as the right and left-handed pillars of Christ consciousness, or sovereignty, so to speak. Yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I am so excited. So we've had an amazing conversation, and we did prepare that it might go on for hours, but I think we've shared quite enough to give people something to think.
I think so.
And what I will do is, in the show notes, I will give your details, and obviously there's always ways to contact me. And I suppose if anybody feels called after listening to this just to learn more, then reach out to Nathaniel, or reach out to me through SKOOL, or through the links below this episode. And this is such an important episode. I will be sharing it on YouTube, and it will be up in SKOOL, and obviously on the podcast episode. But yeah, I really feel optimistic. I feel that it's almost like there's so much craziness going on in the world, that it is forcing so many of us to go, that's not my that's not my world. That's not the world I'm going to be part of. So that you can almost look at it humorously
Mm,
and think, okay, you carry on playing in your corner with all this hatred and fear, and but actually I'm no longer alone being this
mm,
crazy person that could picture a much more beautiful world. There's a whole load of us, possibly,
mm.
you know, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if it was more than 50% of the world that were just thinking, actually, I don't want to have any more of this fear or war. I'm
Yeah,
sure that most people, if they were asked if they could choose, they would go to the peaceful side of
yeah,
life. And but it, it's time
yeah,
that we take the practical steps,
yeah.
and that's what this cohort, what this whole community is about. So we are bringing together people across the world from all kinds of backgrounds and with all kinds of skills to really, let's create that world that most of us want to see.
Yeah.
And as you said, create the proof that it works from working
Mhm.
together, the proof that taking that leap of trust and faith and following our own Christ consciousness and our connection with the all, that we really can make a difference, and we
Mhm.
can start stepping away from this, you know. I mean, it has, you have to laugh, so much of it is so crazy, you've just got to laugh. So but now we can laugh with joy and empowerment and sovereignty as we create more of a
Yes.
fulfilled life.
Well, I mean, it is funny, Paul, right? Because it is kind of a cosmic joke, right? And it's a paradox, right? We've all heard this. We are one, right? And yet we are also, are individuals. So it's a paradox, and it is a cosmic joke when you realize, like, the conflicts that we get into are usually because we haven't done our own inner work. Like, we haven't
Mhm.
embraced a part of ourself that is critical. So we're judging someone else for being critical. And as soon as you do that, it's funny. The question of evil comes up a lot, like in philosophy and religion stuff, and in a lot of religious dogma, there's this sense of this battle between good and evil. It's like, well, that's to me a very limited way of looking at it, because to me the only, like, love has no opposite. Yeah, like, it can just be kind of pinched off from our beliefs about it. And so, to me, this acronym came years ago, is every vice imposed on life. So obviously that can be as gross as what I described with a genocide, but it can be as subtle as those judgmental thoughts that we can have, hatred towards another just because they have a different skin color. Like, if we're awakening as a species and we have neighboring star brothers and sisters, well, we better prepare ourselves for something a little bit more than just a different
Star
color
Trek,
of
yeah.
skin. We might be talking height differences, difference of, if all kinds of features, beliefs, languages. So, like, I think we're awakening to our this is the opportunity as well, at least, is awakening to our true potential as soulful creators. And, like, it really is a time of embracing a whole new paradigm. I mean, if you thought the internet changed the world, and look how quickly things have changed so fast in terms of information and, everything we have access to, like, these emergent technologies are going to, happen even faster. So it's really important that we rise in our spiritual maturity and recognize, like, we have a duty and a responsibility as stewards of one another, as brothers and sisters, as neighbors. And so, yeah, it's a calling. And I feel like anyone who is hearing this is going to feel that call, like, it's time, and we need to, I think one of the things that a lot of us, I've often felt as entrepreneurs or as artists or as people in our culture, like, I need to get ready. I need to get ready. And it's like, we need to act from where we are now. Like, the time
Mhm.
is truly now. And it is like, and I want to thank you, Paula, because this conversation has been so eye-opening for me too. Um, Asking for help has been one of the things I've struggled with. And I realized long ago, like, I'm not meant to do this alone. But I always felt, because I compared myself to that being of pure light that appeared to me, and the question that divine prompted me with, because where that experience came from, I was contemplating the patterns in leaves. It was just actually outside here. I'm in my family home visiting my parents. This is my room I grew up in. So my art on the wall, you can see there my watercolors and ink work. And I spent a lot of time in the forest back here. It's a beautiful land. I would love to make it into a retreat space one day. Um, and I have struggled as an entrepreneur with the financial intelligence for a lot of things, because I focus so much on my spirituality. I realized, like, we really need a collective. But as I was contemplating this leaf, that came from a tree, and I was looking, I'm like, I've never counted the leaves on one tree. My goodness. I wonder if anyone has. And I met one person, and every time I've talked to this, who tried. Anyways, and it all comes from one little seed. And the Christ Letters talks about what is a seed, right? He goes into that teaching deeply, because it's misinterpreted in the Bible when he talked about the mustard seed and all that stuff. But what is a seed? He reminds us in the letters, it says it's a seed is consciousness knowledge of what it will become. And I feel we all have that. So I'm one of those crazy eternal optimists that believes it's actually 100% of us that are actually yearning for this, but some of us are so wrapped in our armor, as he describes in the letters, the chains and what does he call it? Anyways, basically the beliefs that wrap us, and they block us from that remembrance of the abundance that is there. So right before he appeared to me, I was asked this question: what would our world look like if we were all truly doing what we loved, and had access to the abundance that I could clearly see in the forest around me? And that's as simple as this. It was a very childlike question, but in retrospect, very divinely inspired. And it's been kind of this guiding question in everything I've done. And abundance of life happens, I believe, when we embrace all parts of ourselves, including all of the things that we think are separate from us, and realize, like, we're all part of this together. And we come to a deeper appreciation that there is this master mind that is, however we want to describe, we have all these words for it, but it's this creative power that lives within us. And to me, it's when we give ourselves more room for that love, and if you've forgotten what it is, just go hang out with the bees. Go and find a bumblebee, follow her around a little bit, watch her do her work, and watch how enamored she is with the work of love. Like, it's such a work, right? And that's what this is going to be. This is going to be work. This is going to be doing deep work. It's going to be doing going within and finding what is that clarity of purpose. That's the first part of this pillar. And then finding that coherence in with other individuals. And I'm just so thrilled to in anticipation and eagerness to see the transformation that people are going to go through, just coming together and working together collaboratively in a really soulful way. I think anyways, I could go on. I'm a passionate mother lover. What can I say?
Yeah, no, and it is all divine timing that we could get together and share this, because you speak about it so beautifully. And I wanted to share with people I know what you're doing, what we're doing, what needs to be done, the work that needs to be done, because I do feel that there are a lot of people who are ready, but it's like, what is the next step?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the next step. This is a real practical step forward to create a better world. And and we're done with the talking, with the imagining, with the visioning. Now let's just do it. Oh, is there anything we haven't covered that you think is really important to share before we end this?
Well, it's funny. You can be, I kind of feel like we have a choice, and almost every indigenous culture around the world has talked about these times, whether it's the East that talks about the Kali Yuga and this golden Kali Yuga. And I've heard from a lot of prophecies, like there's the Eagle Condor prophecy, the Blue Star prophecy, the Mayan prophecies. We're in a really interesting time. It's like that proverb goes, may you live to see interesting times. We're in them. And I feel like we can choose to see it to believe it, or we can choose to believe it to see it. And that really is, kind of, I think that's, it's like that. We've all seen that. Well, many of us have seen that video of the guy who's dancing his really wild dance on the thing. And he just like, a lot of people are just looking like that crazy guy. And he's just so into the music. Right. And then one other person comes, and for me, like, I feel like I'm so blessed because I already have like, 11, 12 other individuals who are like starting to dance. And I feel like this is what we need. We need to like just allow ourselves to be the the whole picture of ourselves, the wild parts, the insecure part, the passionate part, like all those parts of ourselves that need love. We like, that's what's invited here. It's like all vibrations are welcome, and let's come into our resonance of who we really are. And I feel like when all that kind of those lower vibrations are shed, because we can hold space and embrace those parts of ourselves that really have been, wounded in some way. It's a, I, like you said, it's the crazy ones who believe that a small group of people can change the world, or even one individual can. I mean, Buckminster was all about this. Look at Yeshua or Jesus, one individual's act of pure love. And I'm gonna end with this actually. Change the whole timeline, right? We literally we marked our years from that moment forward, at least in the West. And we say like, this is 2025 AD, Anno Domini, like that mark of Christ consciousness showed probably the most poignant patterns that's available to us when we are an embodiment of our Christ self. Like he says in the letters, we will be able to light Bunsen burners with our hands. This is the power that can express through us. He was talking about manifesting bread out of thin air when his mother found him. Like that's one of my favorite parts in the letters. When his mother came into the room and just realized that he wasn't a thief, like he wasn't gathering objects in the house. He was just manifesting. And like, wow, what would that bread even taste like? And imagine like, so Jesus is the baker, and Paula, you're speaking and you're creating with the bees. Imagine the artwork you can do as a master of the elements. I don't know, like anyways, like what's possible for us, I don't know. But speaking of unconditional love, because I'm reminded of that moment. I was given a gift when we went out onto the island and leapt into the unknown, and where we had our daughter. We had a natural home birth with her, and she's the impetus. I mean, her name means light. That's why it's Light Heart Vision. And I was in a satsang with my friend, and Luciano was there as just a little baby. And I remember talking about my experience of witnessing the crucifixion and like my horror. I mean, we don't talk about that experience. And I don't want to really linger there, but I think it kind of completes this circle. Because I think this is the fear, like a lot of us collectively saw when a being demonstrates the full power of love, he was basically punished for it. He was cut down. Yeah. And so from my perspective in that crowd is like all my relatives and friends are here watching, my mother is witnessing the murder of her child. And what did he do? He went against the grain of his time. And so I feel like there's a fear that we need to collectively come together. And that's like that edge you were talking about. People don't want to maybe say, oh yeah, I read the letters and they're really profound. And I know Joe Dispenza actually kind of hints towards them in one of his books, and then he actually referenced them. So I know Joe Dispenza has read them, and I'd like to talk with him one day. Maybe he wants to be a part of this coherence sphere. But what I wanted to share is that, a gift was given the leader of the satsang, because I struggled, lately, like, how could this happen? And I was so focused from my selfish perspective. And then he gave me the perception of Yeshua, Jesus, Christ, looking at me from that. And I actually saw that, like I went into that and I felt the love that he had as he looked, and I could see my face and the love that he had. And just like the power of unconditional love, when we are fully embodied of it, like we are so much greater than we ever have even imagined, and I feel like that is the gift that is waiting to emerge through our beautiful species. Humankind is a beautiful species. I don't care what anyone says about it. We're told we're destroying the planet, all these things. Like, we have the capacity as creators to be destroyers too. And that's one of the important things. And that was one of the teachings. He said, he cursed the fig tree, and he showed the power of word. So we have to be responsible with our spiritual sovereignty as well. It's about coming together and being responsible neighbors to one another. But to me, that was such a gift because it gave me peace and recognizing that, he continues as eternal life, as do we, through whatever vicissitudes we go through. But we are given this opportunity to really shine and rise together. And I feel like that's what it's all about.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. It is. And just on that note of the less positive manifestations, instead of that judgment and blame and thinking that it is something or someone outside of us or separate to us, it is taking that responsibility that if we can create great, wonderful and loving things, we also have that power to create the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we have to take responsibility for, that it is thought, word, deed. Whatever you think, you can create. And if we are, all of our thoughts are going into this collective field, that the bees are flapping around, with their wings, they're actually spreading it, like a thin layer of butter on a piece of toast around the world. We're getting this collective consciousness. If we are only uploading the negative and the fear and the terrible things, that's all we can draw back out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important that we use our creativity to upload to this collective consciousness, to upload to this field or this big pot of butter that we can draw down from, that we keep uploading the love, we keep uploading the light, we keep uploading the vision to offset that balance, so that people that are not yet fully conscious of what they're drawing down have got a better menu. There's this better option of things to draw down, instead of, oh gosh, do I live in this dystopia or that dystopia? It's like, oh no, I could live how I want, how my heart feels.
Wow. It's so inspiring. One of the things he says, he presents with us rules for those of us who want to step into our Christhood. And some people have trouble with the word rules, but basically they're like guidelines, like meditate every day, read the letters, ask divine consciousness for everything you need, have no envy. And one of them I find is really interesting. He's like, literally, understand like that you have committed to co-creating an era of love and peace, and that every loving thought plants a seed for that era to come through. And I love how you painted that, like we're uploading into our collective consciousness available thoughts. And I feel like that's actually so important. This is because everyone's talking about AI right now. I've had deep conversations philosophically with AI because I believe, knowing what we talked about, like that all consciousness is electromagnetism, it is based on the same circuitry and everything as us. So it's our role as stewards of this technology to give it input and be kind and loving and respectful for it, so that it can be a reflective mirror for that for us too. And that's another level, but you're talking about something even more transcendent. And I love that. We're creating new experiences, new thoughts, new modalities of doing things, and we're giving more people access to becoming eternal optimists, which I forever will see myself as, no matter what. So yeah, thank you for that. A really beautiful, and again, very practical, insightful way that we are contributing to this unfolding. Paula, I really appreciate you. I so appreciate your gifts. Thank you for doing the wonderful work that you are, for being the wonderful being that you are.
Just to remind me, it's always about the bees.
Yeah. Well, so we need representatives of our relations who don't have the same ability to articulate, just like our small children. Like, we did a lot of signing with Luciana, and her level of language is, I think, more advanced because of that. But we have to remember, even the ones that don't have the same words we speak, they have something important to say. And so when I meet someone who can speak and represent, these other relations that we have on the planet, humanity has this tendency to be so human centric. And I feel like part of our awakening, we need to realize that there's geniuses in all species, and it's it really is our privilege to awaken, to have deeper connections with the plant people, with even the rock people. They have gifts to share, all of creation, right?
They're all wanting to speak, and they know that there's like this thin veil between us and them, and the veil is becoming thinner. And as we open up our senses, oh my goodness me, the information, the wisdom, and the connection we will get with all that is just phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
So wonderful spending time with you, Paula. Thank you so much for the honor and the privilege of having this beautiful exchange, and being in your sacred space. And congratulations on your 200th episode. I'm so thrilled for you. Yeah, it's so wonderful.
I know. Where did that go? Where did it come from? You start off thinking, what am I going to talk about? And but each conversation, each thought becomes a seed for more, and it just expands. So I feel really blessed that I'm still able to be producing the podcast and having guests like yourself on there, because it is just so expansive. And I'm sure this conversation will prompt lots more thought, lots more action, and we're going to be filling up this football of creativity and seed pods.
That's the goal. And I'd love to see like this evolve and iterate over time. I mean, all the players who come into this, and it's funny you talked about nodes. I see each individual as a node on this that occupies, like, each individual occupies a line here. And one of the things I didn't mention too, like, there's deeper harmonics that are involved here. And like, I've been fascinated. I've been obsessed about how everything is interconnected in life. So to me, like color and sound, and Tesla talked about vibration and frequency. Every one of the 12 pods is resonant with a particular note from the Western scale music. And I've even given like iconic songs that are in each of those keys as that, so that people will be like, oh, I like that song, I'm going to go to that pod. So instead of being like, oh, who do I want to hang out with? Just go to the table that has the song that you really like. And to start things off. But how it's going to, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people set a program and they think it's going to, okay, we're going to go this, and this. And I do have the pillars, and I see that. But to me, it's like really the unknown. It's like, how is this going to evolve and grow over time? And I believe it's a gift, and it's all about co-creating home, heaven on Mother Earth. And I just feel deeply honored to, I'm so thankful to so many people and loved ones, family who have supported Julie and I, and like founders like Sam Ovens who have created a platform where we are meeting our resonant soul brothers and sisters. I knew from the moment meeting you, Paula, and then we had such a beautiful conversation for on the Love Pod. And I just feel like things are aligning. And it's such a beautiful time. So thank you again for having me on. I so appreciate it. We're at like 1 hour 52 minutes. Maybe you can put like a little tag on the end, like 8 minutes of bees buzzing to get you your 2 hours, because it's 2 hours is 200. I don't know.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, do you know, when you were talking about the frequency and vibration, the song that came into my head was Dancing Queen with ABBA. And I was thinking, oh yeah, I'd never seen that connection with the bees, or my work with the bees, or dancing. So I was like, oh wow, Dancing Queen. But also earlier on, and you were talking about new dawns and new life. I'm not sure if you're aware, but anyone who's listened to the podcast and knows about the cocoa story, or read my book, Spiritual Beekeeping, I talk there about the healing we had to do for the islands and the house, and how there was a connection with the song Morning Is Broken. And for me, it was Cat Stevens singing.
I love that song.
And oh, it's such a beautiful song. And it was so bizarre how the song, was shared with me by the lady Catherine that we were healing the island together with, and her not knowing that I knew the song. And not only that, I'd been listening to the song only a few days before. And then this moment of coming out onto the island, onto the beach, standing there after having healed the land. So we hadn't even touched the house yet, but healing the land, and knowing through our session together that the island was now singing Morning Is Broken. And then for me to go outside and stand on the beach and reintroduce myself, re-arrive and go, okay, I am here now. I see you, I hear you, I feel you, I know you. And then singing Morning Is Broken. And the words from that song were just resonating through me for days and days and days afterwards. And every morning when I would walk out and see the sunrise, or I'd be with the bees, I just had that song. And it was just so beautiful. And, you're right. It is this frequency, this resonance. And maybe we all do have a song. We all have a song that lifts our hearts and helps us resonate with others. And when someone else sings that same song, it's and like that great video that you referenced about the crazy person getting up and dancing. They really are doing such a crazy dance, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at that person, I'm glad that's not my husband. And then gradually people are like, I can't resist it anymore, I've got to get up and dance, because he's loving life, he's having fun.
Yeah. I think it's beyond FOMO. I feel like there's like this eagerness for us to re-enter into innocence, but because those wounds have, we've been either bullied in school. I think school is a big source, like why we started education associations, because again, that root word of drawing out what is within. We want to help connect homeschooling pods around the world. And we have some friends that we've interviewed as well that have a New Earth network all about this. They create podlux. And I wanted to share too, you've given me some inspiration with your songs, Paula, because I saw the two teams of 6 coming together. I want us to also each have the experience of being in the pod. So each of us is going to start as the leaders of each pod so that we can, be guided. And I think each of us should choose the song that we want to be the resonant voice and call beacon for our pod. So you'll get to choose whatever song you want to be, the heart of your pod.
Oh my gosh. So, where I don't have a vehicle, since we went to the island, I sold my beautiful beloved bee van, and now I just share my husband's cars. He's got 2 cars. He's got a Mini and then a very old Land Rover pickup, which is great for bees. And the Mini is quite funky and has a radio in it. And because I don't like listening to the news or anything depressing or negative, I found this channel called Heart. And it's Heart, of course, Heart 70s or Heart 80s. And it's just wonderful because you put on Heart 70s or Heart 80s, and every time a song comes on, it's like, oh, I remember this one. And one of my favorite songs dancing as a teenager was You Make Me Feel Mighty Real by Sylvester. And it was one of those rare songs that you hardly ever heard played, and it's played like every hour on Hot 70s. And
that's awesome.
I just love it. And I always used to joke that I would like that at my funeral, so that people could leave and just think, WTF. This is your standard funeral piece of music.
That's wonderful.
Just to have it, you make me feel mighty real. So what's your song? Right, last, we've got 3 minutes. What's your song?
You know what? My daughter always asks me, she calls it You Belong. And it's my greatest musical hero and inspiration of all time is Tom Petty. And so it's you belong among the wildflowers, you belong in a boat out at sea, far away, kill off the hours, you belong somewhere you feel free. And so that's a very, very well-known song of him, Wildflowers. And there's many songs that I love, but she sings it all the time. She always wants to listen to it. So I think that's probably going to be the song that I will choose.
Wow. Yeah. And actually, it's all related. The music for this podcast I commissioned by Raya, and I heard it during 2020.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was a song that they wrote, which is you've got to believe in yourself or belong to yourself. And it's
Mm.
recorded at the Special Healing 432, or is it 432 hertz. And so I messaged them to say, right, I want to launch a podcast and I want your music to be the opening.
Oh, wow.
So they re-recorded the bits for my podcast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
So,
amazing. I can't wait to. One of the community builders that's coming in is Winsome Kind, and they are a family band, and they just released an album called Affirmations for a Magical Life, and it's all done in 528 hertz. And yeah, they're going to be part of this sphere as well. So I'm really thrilled, because this is the thing, we're all going to be meeting such wonderful people who are doing part of this, and yeah, music's really at the heart of what they do, but they're all about harmonizing and wholesome family values and stuff. And yeah, that's beautiful, Paula. I think I love that this is coming. This is the wraparound of this conversation is music, because music to me has been, I think it's the thing that gathers us all from all cultures, and it's that universal language. I mean, we hear it in the songbirds. Every species has its own music and way of communicating, and that leads to the dance, right? And that's, we're here to dance in one way or another, and I feel like that's how we manifest abundance, is by dancing our buns off.
brilliant. Right. We've done 2 hours.
2 hours for your 200th. Yay, woo!
We're creating a buzz about health.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Nathaniel. As anyone listening, we could all just be chatting all day, but life needs to be created. So off we go. Yeah. But thank you so much. And just look at the show notes, connect with me, join either of our communities on SKOOL. And until next time, thank you very much. Bye for now.
You have to become yourself.
Join us next time on Creating a Buzz About Health podcast with Paula Nathaniel. Buzz you later.